Hello everybody, and welcome to yet another episode in our series on Premiere Pro Basics. And in this episode we are talking about adding clips to your timeline. So we're going to discuss creating in and out points, some keyboard shortcuts that'll be useful, and just the general structure and functionality of the timeline. And if you haven't watched our previous videos in this series on organizing your files, setting up a sequence, and workspaces, make sure you check those out before you watch this video. That way you kind of understand where we are in the editing process. So the first thing we're going to do here is talk about a couple ways you can drag a clip into a timeline. So I'm going to start by going over to my B-roll footage and double clicking on this clip. And as you can see, it has now appeared up in my source monitor. So the simplest way to add this to your timeline would just be to click and drag it and bring it down. But when you do that, what you're doing is you're bringing the entire B-roll clip into the timeline. And there's rarely an occasion that you would ever want your entire clip in the timeline. So what you can do from there is you can click and drag. If I use this to zoom in a little bit, you can click and drag the ends here and trim it to the portion of the video that you want, but that's not really efficient, especially when you're doing a lot of edits and you're trying to do them quickly. So I'm going to delete this for now. Just click on it and press delete, and then I will go back up to my source monitor. So as you can see, I have this little playhead right here that I can use to scrub through this video clip. I can also use this to set what are called in and out points so that we can select a portion of the clip that we actually want to use. So if we scrub forward a little bit, I know I do this camera move where I tilt up from the plant to the painting of the elephant in the background, and there you go. You see the move right there. So now what we want to do is create an endpoint where this move starts. So another way to scrub through this clip is just by clicking on the source window and using the left and right arrows so I can really hone in on the spot that this camera move begins. And you can see right about here is where I start tilting up. So this is where we want to create our endpoint. So there's a couple ways to do this. One of them is going down to the little toolbar down here and clicking this Mark In button, which we can just click. And then as you see, it creates an endpoint right here. So now the portion of the clip that is selected is from this endpoint until the end of the clip. Now, if I go back by hitting Control Z, I will show you another much quicker way to do this, and that's just by pressing I for in. Press it once, automatically creates it exactly where your playhead is, makes it super easy and simple. And I know it doesn't seem like a lot of work to go down here and click on this, but these keyboard shortcuts will save you a lot of time in the long run. So now that I've created my endpoint, I'm going to press spacebar to let this play out and find our out point. So right about there is when I get to the end of my move. So I can go to this other little tool right here where it says mark out, or press the O key. And now as you can see, here is my selection. I have my endpoint, which I can jump to by pressing the up arrow, and my out point, which I can jump to by pressing the down arrow. So now that I've selected this portion of the clip, when I click and drag this down into the timeline, it's only going to use the portion of the clip that I've selected. But you might be asking yourself, what if you only want the audio or the video from that clip? Well, if you've already dragged it down, one way that you can do it is by going to the clip, right-clicking, and going to unlink. If you click unlink, these two portions of the clip, the audio and the video, will now be separate. So if I only wanted to keep the video and wanted to delete the audio, I could click the audio and delete it. Now I'm only left with the video, and I could put something else under it if I don't want the audio from that B-roll clip. Another way to do this would be to go up back to your source monitor, and instead of clicking and dragging the clip by the image, you can go down to these two little markers right here. This little film reel will bring only the video down into the timeline, and this little audio waveform will bring down just the audio. So if you wanted for some reason, say in an interview, to only include the audio from a clip, you could do that and avoid bringing down the video as well. So if you're completely new to Premiere, you are probably a little bit confused on what I did as far as dragging down the video and where I put it and where the audio is and just kind of the timeline in general. So I'll kind of give you a little breakdown of how the timeline works. So as you can see in the source monitor, there's this little bar of numbers, which is your time code. There's also a time code in your timeline and on your program monitor as well. So if I scrub this little playhead along, you will see that the time code changes. And the time code of your timeline and your program monitor should correspond and be the same time code. So the way Premiere is structured in the timeline is that everything is in layers. So what layers means is basically that in the video section, different things take priority over another. So as you can see here, we have V1, V2, V3. These are video layers 1, 2, and 3. So if I have a video on each of these layers and they're taking up the entire frame, I will only see what's on the top layer. And then on the audio side of things, audio 1, 2, and 3, you can have as many audio layers as you want. One doesn't necessarily override the other like they do in video. They can all just kind of play correspondingly. So if you have some audio from an interview as well as some music and maybe some sound effects, they can all be placed here and all be heard equally at the same time. And you are not limited to 3 layers. This is just what the default is on my program in particular, but you can add as many layers as you want. So you are not limited to just a certain number of layers in a timeline. Now, without going into too much detail on what all of these things do, because I could probably do all of this in a whole separate video, I'll give you a basic rundown of what some of the key functions are down here. So this little M right here is a mute button. So you can see that on all your audio tracks. So if you click this, it'll light up green and that track will now be muted. So the opposite of muting is soloing. If you click the S button and this will light up yellow, this will be the only track that you can hear. All the others will essentially be muted. And you can solo and mute multiple things at once. And then up in the video, just like the mute button for audio, this little eyeball toggle, if you click this, it will remove the video from that layer. Well, it won't remove it, but it'll keep you from seeing it in program. So if I were to go over to where my video is right here, click the little eyeball, you can see it goes away. And this can be useful if you have multiple stacked layers of things and you just want to see something below. You can click the little eyeball, get rid of the layer that you're working with. Some other functionality to point out about the timeline, just from a structural standpoint, is down here you can scrub left and right on the timeline, and over here you can go up and down on your video and audio tracks in particular. And then these little circles at the end of each of these will actually shrink and stretch the video and audio sections of the timeline. So if you wanted to, see something in more detail and less detail, you could do that. And then same goes with the horizontal part. If you want to see more of your timeline, make everything, smaller for a longer video, or if you want to see things in more detail, you can go the other way. So thank you guys for watching. I hope this was useful, and make sure you check out more of our content on Premiere Pro tutorials and some of the other stuff that we got going on our page.